scream tore through the silence of the Khamar-Daban mountains. Then, one by one, the hikers began to collapse. It happened in a matter of minutes. The sole survivor would later describe a scene that defied all logic, and by the time it was over, 5 of her companions were dead. For more than 20 years, she kept the details of that day buried. When she finally broke her silence, her story shattered the official explanation. More than 30 years later, the Khamar-Daban incident remains one of the most chilling mysteries in hiking history. But when you look at the evidence, the reality is even more disturbing than the rumors. What actually took them down, and why did the investigation leave so many questions unanswered? But to find the answers, we have to look at the group that started it all. The expedition was led by 41-year-old Lyudmila Korovina. To her students, she was an authority figure who ran the Azimuth Hiking Club at a vocational school in Petropavlovsk. She had a reputation for pushing her students to the absolute edge of their limits. She believed they were capable of more than they thought, and she made sure they proved it. By August 1993, she had already conquered the Tian Shan, the Urals, and the harsh terrain of the Karakum Desert. She had hiked the Khamar-Daban range before, and she was confident she could do it again. But that confidence was a double-edged sword. Some parents had noticed their children returning from her trips completely drained, sometimes questioning if she provided enough food or pushed them too hard. The students never agreed. They trusted her completely. To them, being exhausted was just proof that the training was working. 6 young hikers joined her for this trek. Some had spent years preparing for this specific moment. One student had only secured a spot after replacing another person at the last minute. Another had to fight to prove she was ready after struggling on a previous winter hike. They were determined. They had been planning this for 6 months. The plan was a grueling 130 to 140 miles through some of the most remote wilderness in Siberia. It was a level 3 hiking route, a level of difficulty that experts warned beginners to avoid. Then there was the weather. The summer of 1993 was a nightmare of record-breaking rain, the heaviest the region had seen in 30 years. Yet to this group, it was not a red flag. It was just another challenge. On August 2, 1993, they gathered at Murino Station. They posed for a group photo, smiles on their faces, and set off into the mountains. They had no way of knowing that for 6 of them, this would be the last photograph ever taken. The first few days went exactly as planned. The group crossed the Langutai Pass and began the steady climb toward the Khamar-Daban ridge. They even caught one rare day of clear weather, which they used to rest before pushing forward. Then the atmosphere shifted. Heavy rain and snow suddenly swept across the mountains, driven by powerful winds that felt wrong for the middle of summer. The forecast had given no warning of this. As the storm moved in, a thick claustrophobic fog swallowed the peaks. Another hiking group in the area later described it as sticky, a strange sensation that was impossible to ignore. On August 4, the group reached the summit of Khanula. They set up camp on an exposed stretch of rock and grass, leaving them with almost no shelter from the elements. The plan was simple. They intended to climb one more lower peak before descending to the Snezhny River. That was where the leader's daughter, 23-year-old Natalia Korovina, was waiting with her own separate hiking group. They never arrived. Natalia waited through the day, convinced the storm had simply delayed them. When they still had not appeared by the next morning, her group eventually continued on, assuming they would catch up later. They never did. At roughly the same time Natalia was waiting by the river, her mother's group was fighting for their lives on the mountain. No one knows exactly what triggered the collapse, but in those final hours, a nightmare began. Only one person would live to tell the story. The first account of what happened did not come from a police file. It came from a handwritten statement. During the investigation, Valentina Utochenko was asked to put everything she remembered on paper. Reading it feels like watching someone try to piece together a nightmare, one blurred detail at a time. According to her account, the collapse started before sunrise on August 5. At 4 a.m., brutal winds ripped the ropes from their tents. They scrambled in the dark to secure them. 2 hours later, a tent pole snapped, leaving their sleeping bags soaked. By 10 a.m., Alexander Krysin told the group that everything was freezing and drenched. Snow was falling so hard they could barely see. With no sign of the weather letting up, they packed up and started moving. They had gone only 10 meters when Alexander suddenly collapsed. The group rushed to help him back to his feet, but he kept falling. The group leader, Lyudmila, stayed with him. She told the others to keep moving downhill, but she called one of them back almost instantly. She checked Alexander and realized his heart had stopped. She then ordered Valentina Utochenko to help 16-year-old Victoria down the slope. But as soon as Valentina Utochenko reached her, Victoria bit her. Even in the chaos, Valentina Utochenko managed to drag her back toward the group. Then things spiraled into total madness. Tatiana started slamming her head against the rocks. 19-year-old Denis crawled behind a cluster of stones and disappeared into his sleeping bag. When Valentina Utochenko went back to check on Lyudmila, she found her dead. She tried to get 24-year-old Timur to his feet, but he was gone. Within minutes, everyone else was dead. Valentina Utochenko was now completely alone. She fled toward the tree line, crawled into her sleeping bag, and covered herself with a scrap of the tent to survive the night. When morning broke, she climbed back up to the campsite. She found all 6 of them exactly where they had fallen. None of them had moved. Before turning to leave, she closed their eyes. Valentina Utochenko spent several days alone in the wild before reaching a river where a group of kayakers finally found her. They treated her for severe hypothermia and rushed her to the city of Slydyanka. That was when the search for the group finally began. When the bodies were recovered, the scene was baffling. They had been exposed to the elements for weeks. Nearly all the victims were wearing only thin trousers, and 3 of them were barefoot. They were flown by helicopter to Ulan for autopsies. The official conclusion was simple. All 6 hikers had died from hypothermia. But that does not explain the behavior Valentina Utochenko described. She saw people collapsing without warning, biting one another, and violently striking their heads against rocks. Those details did not fit the official report. They became the foundation for decades of debate over what actually happened on that mountain. But what could force 6 experienced, hardened hikers to behave like that? And why would they be found without proper gear in a freezing storm? The official report blamed hypothermia. Konstantin Yugov, the head of the Bureau of Forensic Medicine in Buryatia, argued that the freezing rain, total exhaustion, and altitude made their deaths inevitable. But the autopsies revealed something else. They found pulmonary edema and organ damage that pointed to a severe protein deficiency. That discovery creates a massive problem. If these hikers were starving, why did rescuers find their food still packed in their bags? Why wouldn't they just stop and eat? Some critics blamed Lyudmila Korovina. They claimed she pushed her students until they were too exhausted to function. But that theory falls apart when you look at the facts. 2 other hiking groups were out in that same storm, and they all made it out alive. Then there is the testimony from the search team. Valery Tatarnikov and Vladimir Zinov, 2 of the rescuers, later stated it should have been nearly impossible for this specific group to freeze. They confirmed the team had built a fire and enjoyed a full breakfast the very morning the tragedy began. Valentina Utochenko later confirmed they had a strict routine. They ate 4 hot meals a day, relying on grains, powdered milk, crackers, canned meat, and chocolate. They were consuming about 2,400 calories every single day. That is not a group that was running out of food. So where did the protein deficiency come from? Experienced hikers point to Lyudmila Korovina's habit of collecting golden root or rose root to supplement their meals. The group had spent the previous day gathering it. It added calories, but it had no protein. It explains the medical findings, but it does not explain why they died. Years later, journalist Vladimir Zharov went to the mountain to retrace their steps. He found something that makes you wonder if they were ever really in danger of freezing to death at all. He discovered a perfectly sheltered campsite with plenty of firewood just 30 minutes down the trail. Why didn't they go there? Zharov had 2 theories. Either the 1993 maps failed to show the better site, or Lyudmila Korovina saw her students struggling and decided it was safer to stop than to push them for another 30 minutes through the storm. If they were safe enough to stop and rest, why did they end up dying so violently? And what happened during that time at the campsite that turned a standard, planned rest into a death trap? For more than 20 years, Valentina Utochenko lived in total silence. She didn't talk to the press, she didn't talk about the case, and she didn't even tell her husband what she had lived through. She moved to a new city and quietly rebuilt her life, but the truth couldn't stay buried forever. During a birthday celebration years later, a relative finally asked if there was anything she had been carrying. She told her parents everything. The trauma was so severe that she spent the next 2 months in the hospital, unable to eat. Eventually, a journalist convinced her to give a full interview. The details she shared were far more disturbing than her original 1993 statement. She explained that on the morning of August 5, the cold was unbearable. Lyudmila Korovina woke them up and ordered them to pack. They had to head down into the gorge. The wind was so violent they couldn't even stand up. They had to crawl. Then, the first shock, Alexander Krysin collapsed. Valentina Utochenko watched in terror as he started foaming at the mouth. Lyudmila sat beside him, holding him, until she collapsed as well. Then the group started to lose their minds. People were collapsing where they stood. Others were bleeding from their noses and foaming at the mouth. Valentina Utochenko said it felt like being trapped inside a horror movie. She believes Denis S.H. Vachkin saved her life. He kicked her and screamed for her to crawl down the slope. She listened. Denis never made it off that mountain. Valentina Utochenko climbed into her sleeping bag and passed out. When she woke the next morning, she went back to the campsite, hoping for a miracle. Everyone was dead. She took a map and a compass, closed their eyes, and started walking. She remembers following power lines through the wilderness, but she says the journey is mostly a blur. Some wild rumors claim intelligence agents guided her out, but Valentina Utochenko denies it. She says she survived with God's help. But look at the timeline. The group died on August 5. Valentina Utochenko was found by kayakers on August 9. She had survived 4 days alone in the wild. The kayakers were shocked. They found her having washed her clothes, something she has no memory of doing. She was hysterical enough to need medication, yet she calmly cooked flatbread over a fire using nothing but flour, salt, and water. But there is one chilling detail that nobody can explain. In every account, Valentina Utochenko insisted she found the bodies in 2 different locations. But when the search team arrived, all 6 were lying together in the same place. Why the discrepancy? Then came the biggest twist of all. Years later, Valentina Utochenko appeared on Russian television with Lyudmila's daughter, Natalia. On live air, Natalia revealed that shortly after the tragedy, she was called into an office. She was told to stop asking questions and was offered a significant sum of money. She accepted it. Natalia also revealed she was never allowed to identify her mother's body. The victims were all buried in closed caskets. She was told it was because of her age, but she later discovered that none of the families were allowed to view the bodies. Who called that meeting? Why was money being paid out? And why was the state so desperate to keep those caskets closed? Once Valentina Utochenko's interview went public, the theories exploded. The official report never changed, but the mystery took on a life of its own. One of the first theories was altitude sickness. On paper, some symptoms match, but the group was already descending when the deaths began, and most experts agree the elevation simply was not high enough to cause that level of destruction. What about mushroom poisoning? Lyudmila was an expert forager, but that theory has a major hole. Mushroom poisoning takes time to develop. It does not hit an entire group of 7 people almost simultaneously, as Valentina Utochenko described. Then there's the theory of a natural gas release. The region is prone to seismic activity, and some travelers have reported seeing gas venting from cracks in the ground after small quakes. Natalia Korovina has publicly stated she believes gas played a role, though she has also hinted it might not have been natural. That idea led to the most controversial theory of all, chemical attack. Some believe the group was exposed to a nerve agent like Novichok. It would explain the frothing and the convulsions. But there is a catch. Valentina Utochenko described victims bleeding from their eyes, which does not fit the profile of a nerve agent. Furthermore, there is zero evidence of a military test in the area. Even the golden root they were carrying became part of the lore. Lyudmila had a massive bag of it in her pack, far more than the group could ever use. Some think she planned to sell it. Others point to local folklore that says the mountain punishes those who take more than their share. The reality is that every theory explains a piece of the puzzle, but none of them explain the whole thing. They do not explain the gap between Valentina Utochenko's original statement and her later interview. They do not explain why the families were paid off or why they were never allowed to see the bodies. More than 30 years later, the official verdict is still the same. The 6 hikers are listed as having died of hypothermia. Lyudmila Korovina's death is officially attributed to cardiac arrest brought on by hypothermia. But in a case where survivors are silenced, evidence is hidden, and the only witness describes a scene straight out of a nightmare, you have to wonder, is that the whole story, or are there still secrets buried on the slopes of the Khamar-Daban mountains? More than 30 years later, the truth may still be buried somewhere on that mountain. The official investigation concluded that the hikers died from hypothermia and the brutal conditions of the Khamar-Daban range. But for many, that explanation still leaves important questions unanswered. Valentina Utochenko's account, the reported locations of the bodies, and other disputed details have kept the mystery alive for decades. Over the years, theories have ranged from toxic gases and military testing to natural causes and simple human tragedy. Yet every explanation seems to answer one question while raising another. 7 hikers walked into the Khamar-Daban range, expecting to finish a journey. Only one walked out. So what really happened on that mountain? And if the official explanation is correct, why are there still so many questions?